hungry families in Latin America. He's worked for Growing Hope globally for the last 8 years as Associate Director of Latin American and Caribbean programs. Previously worked in Haiti, Church World Service, served as a missionary to the Dominican Republic with Global Ministries. He and his spouse Erin live in Kansas City and attend St. Andrew Christian Church. Also, turns out he's related to Rick Morse. Welcome, Alex Morse!
So it was 2008. I was living in the Dominican Republic and found myself surrounded by about 20 pretty angry men carrying baseball bats. All of them shouting at once in Spanish, and I couldn't really understand what they were saying. Even though I had lived there for a year, my Spanish still wasn't that good. So I had to gather myself and get a little bit of context, figure out what was going on. And I noticed that they had baseball bats, baseball gloves, baseball hats. This was the incredibly passionate group of Boca Chica Little League baseball coaches. And they wanted me to know that the next time we have a mission team arrive, they needed a baseball field to play on. Baseball is huge in the Dominican Republic. It keeps kids out of trouble. It gives them hope of something beyond the urban poverty that they're facing. And the coaches sort of had a field, but it was covered with garbage. It was overgrown. There were no bases even marked on the grass, let alone dugouts or backstops, or any of the things that might make it visibly identifiable as a place where games might be played. So after this first meeting, I get a phone call shortly afterwards from a Disciples church. Their youth group wanted to visit the DR, and they were open to any project. I mentioned the baseball field idea. After some emails back and forth, we figured we could build some simple dugouts, some posts, some sheet metal. They could bring gloves and bats, and we could figure out some way of making bases. So they booked their tickets, and a couple of months later, we got to work. This group of 12 very young kids from Owensboro, Kentucky showed up. And the first morning we went to go to work, it was 7 a.m. It was already hot and humid and really, really hot. So they were already not very excited about what they had signed up for. And we loaded into the vans and we made it to the field, and the kids' faces were just kind of this uniform expression of confusion. I don't think they realized the first step of making a baseball field would be herding the goats off of the field. And they did it as best as an American youth group can herd goats off the field. They just haven't been around that much livestock. So we then started picking up the trash, and there were bottles, needles, all kinds of junk. Just a group of a dozen or so white kids in their garbage bags. We were getting some looks. Little by little, the parents started to come out. The kids started showing up. And probably looking back on it, it was mainly out of curiosity. There was this one kid that was like a little bit of background on the Dominican Republic. It was an island, it formed, and as it formed, it raised up. And so the first 10 feet or so is just pure coral rock to pickaxe through. And we had one kid that was the smallest kid running the pickaxe in 90-degree heat. And I think there was this morbid curiosity of just how long he might last. So he's going, people are starting to show up, a guy comes up with a lawnmower, bags of garbage are piling up from the cleanup, and somebody actually ran down to the mayor's office, and they came back with a local news crew and a garbage truck. And so we start telling everybody about this kind of Field of Dreams moment, right? It's happening. And a little bit later, an Escalade drives up with the Arizona Diamondbacks logo on it. Their camp's just up the road. And they see what we're doing, and they said, hey, we've been trying to find a way to give back to the community, but we haven't found a project that this community stands behind. What can we do to help? And I just said, whatever you can do would be great. So over the course of the day, we went from this completely overgrown pasture to this beautiful field. We had manicured grass. We had a professional major league scouting team manicured field. They were measuring out the bases. They were chalking lines. They brought a full backstop, plus our two very modest dugouts. They didn't look as good after we put them together as we thought they would. Ends up, youth groups don't know construction as well as we thought. But outside of that, it was perfect and it was beautiful, and I was really proud of what we had put together. Finally, something I could point to as an accomplishment from my year of service. That evening, my friend and I talked, and we decided to put some money in for a friend to paint a nice sign on the back wall of the field. We wanted this sense of completion for the whole group. This was an amazing moment that kind of brought all of us together. The next morning, we surprised the group with a beautiful Disciples chalice painted on the back wall on a white backdrop. It said, Owensboro, Kentucky Baseball Field, Disciples of Christ. And we felt so dang good. About a month later, I returned home and was trying to discern what I was going to do next with my life. I needed time to heal from some of the trauma that happened while I was there. It was a really rough year overall, and I witnessed a lot more violence than I really want to unpack right now. I wasn't sure what would be next, but honestly, the only clarity I felt like I had was that international work stuff was the only thing that was off the list. So I decided with a friend of mine to volunteer and go to Arizona, and we put water in the desert for migrants, with the hope that maybe God would speak to me while I was in the desert. You know, it feels kind of biblical, right? And it was just this crushing silence. So I went back to Indiana a bit lost and a bit defeated. Eventually I got to a point where I needed to go back to the Dominican Republic to see if I made any sort of impact, if any of this tumult in my personal life had been worth it. And, just some sort of personal validation, some sense of accomplishment or anything. So I flew down, and the first night I was there, the first thing I did was go to the field, right? Surely this was going to be the sign that maybe God had a use for me. That maybe I could be even a minor piece in this bigger picture. So I turned the corner, and there it is. This already faded sign of a chalice. Piles of trash. The damn goats are back. And the field's obviously been out of use since pretty much the time I left. What I had imagined what was going to be my greatest success, what had given me comfort throughout the previous year, had fallen apart. But at the time, I had gotten so focused on this project being about our group having this great picture and, this idea of this almost magical moment and this field coming together, I got so focused on my own feeling of success and pride that I had missed it. When we labeled it our field, that meant it wasn't their field. And it wasn't their field to take care of, or their field to mow, or their field to pick up, or their field to play on. It's just so easy with our good intentions to make that mistake so quickly, and we make it so often. And instead of having a success story to share, I created a story of my own fail.
Together, we still like you, Alex.